Very miserable. I wanted to cry. They're done. So.
Is that just for one application?
Yeah. 8 essays for one app. I did a little bit of cradling.
I didn't have a cover letter to that.
I've written like 6 the last few months. I've revised my resume a bunch of times. I've written so much.
I revise my resume every time I'm library, but
you gotta reword it.
Yeah.
Figure out
the
the
cover
keywords.
letter, yep, exactly. Those are the clues into getting at least an interview.
Yeah. And things like the interview is the application. Like, I know when they interview, they ask the same questions.
Yeah, they do the same in library interviews.
Mm-hmm.
It's annoying.
Everything they ask is like on my resume. So why don't you just like read my resume? Like so.
And in library interviews, we have to like regurgitate, memorize like author names and titles of books and stuff.
Like a snake did that.
Yeah, exactly.
Dead bat literature. That's weird. I'm gonna read it like that.
I'm like hiding behind my computer, but you're next to me, so it doesn't matter.
Well, we're gonna put a little bit of fun. I'm done being a jackass.
No.
I'm done. That's my thing. Like, that's my stupid. In a funny way. It's not like, I'm a giant teddy bear. I never say anything that
I think the teams that I interact with think I'm weird.
So mine, teams think everyone's weird.
Yeah.
It's their thing. They haven't noticed that they're weird yet. Give them time. They'll realize that, oh, wait, that dude's actually cool.
This one kid, I do this team called the team advisory board, and they come every other step to the library.
Do they come 7?
I think it's 1. A lot of kids come after school for snacks.
Okay.
So,
there's a snack.
Yeah, you have to be.
I'll just hide behind feet.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, they come for snack. We have a grant from Food Bank. Their snack Tuesday after school. So again, a lot of STEM kids in early.
Oh, there's food and stuff.
Yeah, send them our way. It's from 3:30 to 4:30.
The food like bites everywhere.
Okay.
So. He loves that.
That's like the idea.
Akron, are you guys around?
What?
Akron?
What?
Are you there?
Yes.
Hey, did Melanie make it out?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. We're gonna get underway like just a minute or two late. Euclid, is there anybody up there yet? Hello, Euclid.
Oh, hi there. There should be one more person coming.
Okay, cool. Who is that at Euclid? Hi.
Hi, my name's Kristen. I'm not.
Hey, I'm Tom. Hey, Kristen, will you fix your focus?
Oh, could you say that again?
Are you able to adjust your focus just a little bit? You're a little bit fuzzy.
Oh, I can try. Let me adjust it from here because the lights are funny. Hang on.
Yeah, it's just the little thing on the thing. Whoa, that was wild.
Better or worse?
Oh yeah, no, okay. Yeah. No, that's great.
Better?
Yes.
Cool.
Oh, you're in Nichols now.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's the
Yeah. Okay. No, I don't need, don't know what interaction with high school other than high school.
Hey everybody, this is Tom. This is Tom. I'm up in Cleveland today, obviously. We are we're waiting on Mike Fegis. He just texted me. He's just about a quarter of a mile away. Mike's, of course, our presenter for today, so I'm just going to make sure that he arrives okay. In the meantime, what I was hoping is that I just learned that it's Nancy Wolfinger's 24th birthday today. So we're going to sing happy birthday to her, if that's all right.
That's right.
So we can go ahead and do that. We're going to have this kind of like, I mean, anyway, so what we're going to do is on the count of three, we're going to sing happy birthday to Nancy. All right? And that way it's going to like ring all throughout the North Coast because we got Euclid and we got Acton. Okay, so hang on. Here's Nancy. And we're going to sing here. You gotta raise your hand, Nancy. There's Nancy. Okay, you guys all ready? 1, 2, 3, this one. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. I am so glad this is not a choir class. Happy birthday, dear Nancy. Happy birthday to you.
Yes. Thank you. That was very sweet.
Hi, Melanie. Here's Mike. Perfect. Hey, come on in. Tracy. Tracy, Mike. Mike, Tracy. Yeah. The gig is, we're just going to have you up here.
Sounds awesome.
I'm just going to get us underway now. You do. Yep. Yeah, we should be in great shape.
Because there's an ice storm the one day I took for. No, actually. I'll look at the website.
Hey, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and screen share. Mike's here, so we're going to go ahead and get underway. So can everybody kind of see that? Should be looking at Thomas Williams there, getting all comfortable and relaxed. Good. Good. Okay, so the place that we're going to start out, and if you're in Akron and you're in Euclid, if you want to go ahead and mute your microphones. Can they hear me?
What did you
Thomas,
say?
can you hear me? Thomas?
What?
There you are. Okay. So here, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to get underway. If you're in Akron or you are in Euclid, if you want to go ahead and press mute on your microphone. That way we're not kind of hearing you guys. And then go ahead and you can log on to Paradeck at this address. So remember, it's paradeck.com/join. You'll enter that code. Okay? So just to give you guys kind of a walk up to Mike and his presentation.
I'm going to reinforce it. Everybody in the class. It's totally not me.
So good, just to give us all kind of a walk up to Mike Fegis and his presentation, I just wanted us to kind of center our thinking around the idea of narrative writing, right? So what are we really talking about when we're talking about narrative writing? How would we describe that, right? So if you just want to shout out, what does narrative writing mean to you? Katie, what does it mean to you?
Personal stories.
Personal story. Nancy, what does narrative writing mean to you?
Well, we had to do our narrative summary for the month that just went by, so kind of like in a sort of a story-like way, saying maybe what just happened the past month or something. If
Yeah.
you mean that, like
Yeah.
instead of being like a bunch of things, little lines, maybe you're making it kind of flow and having sentences and kind of engage in the person who's reading it. Make it sound.
Right. Excellent description. You center on the idea of story. That story is extremely important when we're talking about narrative writing. Stephanie, what do you think? If I said narrative writing, how would you define it?
More creative than maybe analytical. So last week we did informational writing. It was based on stuff that learned that was important to you. But narrative can be more creative in that you can describe a room as easily as you can describe a character or emotion or a movement or a line. So you can get in depth with characters. And so I think of narrative as like plays or something more open to.
Yeah, it is. It's open to interpretation. That's a great way to look at it. But so many times what you can do is introduce elements of imagination or fiction, even if it's a true story. That helps out narrative. Mike's going to talk about these things today, and one of the things that he did that I thought was super cool was to pass along some PowerPoint decks and some materials that now exist on the PenUltimate Weebly site. So if you go to that PenUltimate Weebly site at some point, you'll be able to see all kinds of artifacts that Mike uses in the classroom. Among those, one of the coolest things that he passed along were things like this. Mike takes images like this into his classroom. What he says is things like, well, you imagine what this man's story might be, right? Pretty open-ended, right? Mike might show you an image like this and ask you, well, what kind of story might contain this image? Where might this scene exist? Now imagine yourself a writer and you sit down and you're prompted by this image. What can you begin to do with it? Where can you come up with something that's totally unusual, totally different, and meets those elements of story that we talked about? If this is one scene in a story, what might happen next? Think of it. Because we're kind of looking at images like this. And Thomas, if you're able to mute your microphone. Akron's a pretty loud. Akron's a very loud.
I like audio participation. That's okay. You're muted somewhere? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh.
And we don't want to.
I'm already muted.
We don't want to hear you right now. There you go. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like for you to go ahead, if you would, and respond to this question, right? And these are things that Mike wants to know about. Do you consider yourself a good writer? Yes or no? We got about 5. We're waiting for you. Yeah, we're thinking. Yeah, we're feeling it. We're feeling it. Oh my gosh, 10-1. We're thinking we're great. I would put mine in the no category for me, just so you know. So whoever wrote the other no, you're not alone. Okay. I consider myself to be a very lousy writer. All right. So that's one question. All right, true or false? Now, this is a different question. You're a good writer. Most of us would agree with that, right? But the next question is true or false? I enjoy the process of writing. How would you respond to that question? I enjoy the process. Whoa, we've got a lot of people who enjoy the process of writing.
Among friends here, it's great.
Yeah, it's a totally friendly crowd.
Beautiful.
We're not going to throw food at Mike or anything, apparently.
I fail here. I know it's all on me.
Two of us. Now, see, they're starting to spill over. We have twice as many people that are really negative as there were before.
They feel more comfortable already?
And if you add me in, now we've tripled it. So the odds are against you. It's moving in the wrong direction, Mike.
You sound so happy about it.
Sweet. I'm trying to build up for you. Yeah, get a little conflict going here in the room. Who here is confused about where to even begin when considering writing something? Come on now, be honest. I'm not going to show you what people say until more of us participate. Come on. Come on. Click that dial. It's almost like going to Vegas and putting the handle on the slot machine, right? All right. So who here is confused?
Oh.
Ooh, half of us are confused. We are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, it goes with the weather.
Exactly. We're going to be stuck in the mud in about 2 seconds here. Do you guys see where this is going? All right. So for those who would, who here would rather have a root canal with no anesthetic than let someone else read your words? Now, please be truthful. Please be truthful. Which would you prefer?
I love the second because I don't have to.
Ready? Okay. Everybody picking one? Are you picking one? I prefer the root canal. One of us will do that.
Oh, no.
One of us does not have dental coverage. That's kind of not good. That's not good. So those are two in the negative. I love having my worker at said yes, or can we talk about something else? So at least we know there are some of us out there who have discomfort on all of the above topics, right?
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Well, how would we characterize that if we were to look at students in our classroom? And I'm sitting here with Stephanie and Jamie. How do you think that a lot of students in your classrooms would have answered those questions? Would they have answered them in the affirmative or more in the negative?
I think in the negative. Especially with the process of writing, I think oftentimes students like to just write things if it's not going to be graded. You know, if it's just writing for the sake of writing, getting your thoughts out, they don't mind that. But when they, that it's going to have some type of grade associated to it, then they become a little more hesitant because it's like you're judging it almost. So.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
And it's so important how you judge it, right?
Right.
Yeah, because I mean it's a subjective thing, but you're in the role where you have to attach a measure of some form to it. How do you do that without squashing the kid, basically?
Right.
Stephanie, what do you think?
I agree. I think a lot of them tend to shy away from saying, can you read this out loud? Especially if it's something that you have to produce like a specific writing sample. So if it's like a memoir or if it's a research paper and you say, we're going to write, today we're going to start a writing project or a writing essay or a writing sample, and whatever combination of those words, once you make it about a classroom environment that's going to judge them on something, it immediately shuts them down. However, you will have those experiences where you have a handful of kids in each class that will doodle or draw or daydream while you're teaching anyway, Monday through Sunday, and then ask you to read what they've been doodling or daydreaming or jotting down while you taught something completely different. So in that environment, it completely takes out the worry of somebody judging you. You're asking a teacher like what they think, not what's this grade for. Mm-hmm. So I think it's universal for any group of kids to have people that want to be heard but are too nervous to step forward too. Mm-hmm. They don't want that judgment either coming from the other side of the desk saying, this guy next to me is going to stand up and ask the teacher to read this. What kind of freak is that? And they're very manipulative either way.
Right. So and a couple of themes that I hear you guys talking about are the idea of careful about how you respond to a student.
Yeah.
But the more freedom that you offer a student when it comes to writing, typically the more kind of engagement you get from that learner, right? Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you make it more about when you make it more about the actual writing itself as opposed to the grade on the writing, you know, you'll get a more positive response.
Right. Like you always have to teach spelling. You'll always have to go back and show them Emily format, and that's great. But that should be always at the end, and if it's even covered anymore. A lot of Common Core cut out emphasis on grammar and punctuation. They want to see, can a child tell a story and have it come full circle, or can they have them tell it beginning, middle, and end, and are there clear points where they break so that you can see that transition.
Right.
And so that's the main thing is that I'm supposed to, as a good teacher, then move forward with. Then I'll worry about your spelling and punctuation, make sure that it's not completely, jumbled up when you go to print it out and show off to your parents what a nice story that was.
Right. Excellent comments. It's Nancy, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted, because Stephanie and I were talking earlier, I think that anonymity is what's been really good for this class, because it's like we see these things all written, but we don't really know who wrote it.
Right.
So it just kind of like frees you up. It kind of frees you up. Like I think you open up more because you figure, well, they're not going to know who wrote it, and also like responding to something that somebody wrote, like you're just sort of spontaneous because you have no idea. If we say, oh, I really like that, you have no idea who that person was, and so I think that that's what I like about this whole class is that we're writing stuff but we don't know who it is. It's like a secret.
Yeah.
And I think I like that part of it.
It's really neat. Katie?
And I would add to that actually, people with the rating groups, the librarians that have more than a few kids, it'd probably be a cool thing to bring Pear Deck into your writing club because that gives the kids anonymity, so they're more likely to share.
Right. Excellent comments, and I want to give Akron and Euclid a little bit of time to just think about this a little bit. But I invite you to participate with us as well in terms of if you have a comment or a question or something, feel free to shout something out that we know that you're here or want to be heard, and we'll certainly involve you in the conversation. We'd like that very much. One of the things that we look at all the time, and it's indeed a big focus for this class, is how is it that we can more engage students? How is it that writing doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing, but it can be a good thing? And I'm really excited that we now have Mike here today to talk about that. I wanted to give you just kind of a real quick slide to just say, hey, you know what? And if you remember when we started the class, we said constructivism is a big kind of thing to think about in your toolkit. Mm-hmm. Curari theory, which is autobiographical self-reflection, we said that's super huge to think about to keep in your toolkit. Those were examples. I wanted to do the same thing here. For us to kind of level set and say, okay, when we're talking about narrative writing, there are a couple different things that oftentimes you'll find that are present in a strong writing program. One of those is kind of models of excellence. The idea being that if you can point someone in the direction of, gee, if you're trying to write, poetry about, snowfall in the wintertime, have you ever read Robert Frost? It's that you can actually pull pieces of text, you can pull from different places and have, students or learners go ahead and review models of excellence as being a means for them to understand. Well, how is it someone else said it? Teachers can also do that. Librarians can do that. We can write up texts, and those can serve as models of excellence. Second thing is raw starts. This idea, and Nancy just pointed to it with this, hey, I'm anonymous, and I can go ahead and, respond in Pear Deck right now, or an exit slip, or sustained writing for a couple minutes, or a 40-minute writing round. Constant and kind of raw writing opportunities. We see those very frequently in writing programs that are strong. Holistic and positive encouragement. I'm not going to steal Mike's thunder, but I know he's going to talk about that. And then, rigorous practice. That you just got to be writing, and you got to be writing all the time in order for that to have impact. So I just wanted you to be thinking about those topics as Mike kind of talks today. Again, this is Mike Fegis. Mike is at Hudson Middle School right now, and Mike is 13 years a coach with Power of the Pen, and I would venture to say you're probably one of the most award-winning coaches in that program.
We've been fortunate.
He's been very fortunate. But there's one of the things that's odd is because you deal with so many teachers around the state all the time, is when you keep seeing the same faces show up, although the students graduate, you begin to ask the question, well, wait, what's the secret sauce? Right. And Mike has always had his handle on how to prompt and encourage kids in the narrative form, particularly in a way that's just outstanding and incredible. And rather than me talking about it, I wanted to just kind of turn it over to Mike. As I do, I just want to remind you, some of the tools that he uses in the classroom are available for you on the Weebly website. So feel free to make use of those. And that said, I think here's Mike Fegis.
Cool. You want me to go up here?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. Just a little more background. Thanks for letting me come today. It's really nice to be here. I've always wanted to be a weatherman, so as you can see, there's some warm air is going to push up from the Gulf, and that's going to meet with that Clipper. And what we're going to see is a real mixed bag through Cleveland through the end of the week. I missed my calling. This is my 20th year at Hudson Middle School, and I was a language arts teacher for 16 of those years, and I taught 8th grade for 13 years. And then I was told, like, they sat me down in May of about 4 years ago and said, hey, you're going to go to 6th grade, you're going to teach science. Congratulations. And my jaw was hanging up. I'm sorry, I'm going where? But I stayed with the Power of the Pen team because reading and writing is really near and dear to my heart. And just for full disclosure, it's funny because my parents went crazy when I was younger because I was a lousy student. I was so reluctant. They bought me books every single year, and I would prefer getting socks instead of getting books. And it was just not my thing. But then once I went to college and I really started reading for pleasure, it changed who I was. And I think a big part of that is the motivation too. When you're teaching kids, if you can get them the book that speaks to them, it changes everything. And then some of you have probably had that experience. Who are teachers and who are librarians? Teachers, where are you? And then librarians. Oh, great. Okay, terrific. What a resource all of you are. So that's my team, and we were able to win state a couple times. It was wonderful because Power of the Pen starts with 500 schools. So to win it once is awesome, and then to win it again is just remarkable. So, Tom, where is my...
Hang on just a second. We're getting there.
No problem.
This is just the technology of me not knowing technology.
There we go.
Here we go. Hang on.
Boon of having rewind.
There we go. Ah, terrific.
Haha.
Nicely done. So some of you may wonder, where do you begin with kids? Because I know when I'm teaching anything from 6th through 8th grade, right away they get stuck because they don't realize that they've been telling stories their whole lives. And what I usually like to do with them is I try to encourage them to think about the last story they told. And the last story they told was at lunch, or it was when they came to school and tell me what they did on their weekend. And a lot of the kids are very nervous for the reasons that we were speaking about earlier. They don't want to be looked at as someone who's a bad storyteller or who can't tell a story. And they're very nervous to put those words down on paper and then have somebody read them or have a teacher judge them. And that was the word I heard a couple people mention was judging it. And so I try to really approach it from the point of, we just want to get good writing out of you. We want to hear your story. And I tell them, when you come in the morning, I hear the kids in the cafeteria, they say, you are not going to believe what happened this weekend. And they don't realize that's a story. They're going to tell this story, and it's going to have a beginning, it's going to have a middle, and an end. And if we're lucky, it'll have some kind of a twist to it. And I tell the kids, feel confident that you're a storyteller already. You would not come in and say, you wouldn't believe when I made lunch this morning. Oh, I went to the refrigerator, and I got mayonnaise. And then I got bologna, and I had this bread, and I put it on there, and boom, it was in the bag, and here I am. I mean, their friends would say, what is wrong with you? You tell a lousy story. And the kids know not to share that story. So, they pick and they choose. And so they're already kind of self-editing. And I like to have them start in that way. So I have them start with their own story. If you would, choose a topic. And I picked 3 things that are important to me. I have several cats, and I'm a soccer player. And I go to North Carolina to the Outer Banks. I don't know how many people recognize that as Cape Hatteras. A lot of OBX stickers out there. So I tell the kids, pick something that you're an expert at. What is something you know really well? And click, and I think the next, there you go. Write what you know is the best way to go. Click again if you would. And the reason for that is we want the kids to be specific, and to be specific, you got to be familiar with your territory. And one of the things, the kids will be inspired to write something maybe about if they're very into science fiction or fantasy, they want to write about an excursion to the moon. But most of them haven't been to the moon. Okay, so they don't have all the technological knowledge to really sell a moon story. We'll talk about that later. But they can be experts in certain things. And I had a writer for Power of the Pen 2 years ago, and she was a horse rider, and I mean like a good, serious horse rider. And every single one of her prompts, no matter what the story starter was, she found a way to swing it around very convincingly into what she knew really well. And her pieces always did beautifully because there was a specificity that you can't get without having lived it. And then, of course, just having an interest in it. Anything you're interested in is going to be, you'll be more successful. When I was teaching language arts, I said, okay, kids, we're going to start our 200-page paper on the history of broccoli. And they're going to jump right out the nearest window, and I would too, because unless you love broccoli, you don't want to write about it. So these are the things that I want to get out of their writing, and by having them choose a story for something that they're an expert at, I think it's the way to start, if you would. So then you have to decide if you have a story or just an idea. And then we went back to talking about the elements of a story. In the most basic sense, a story's got several critical parts. Got to have characters, plot, a clear conflict, and then a climax. And that's a nice thing, is you can boil it down to just those few pieces. And whether you're working with kids that are very young, or you're working with
honors and AP seniors, the story's going to have those same elements. You're just going to look for more or less detail. And as as the person who is kind of helping them along, you'll kind of know how much to push them and what kind of things you'll want them to have. But I liken this to when we talk about the concept of a car. A car's got several pieces it's got to have. It's got to have a chassis of some kind. It's got to have wheels so it can move. It's got to have a steering wheel. But if you talk about a smart car versus a Lamborghini, which is a really nice sports car, they're in the same category, but you would never confuse the two. You would never look at a boxy little smart car and say, whoa, what a sports car. You think, oh my gosh, if I got hit in that by a truck, I would be massacred. So although you've got the same pieces, it depends on how you put it together. It's going to give the story its own look and its own flavor. Click if you would. So I told you I have these three interests. And now I have to decide, do I want to tell the story of when my cats found the uninvited guests that came into my house? Do I want to talk about my own soccer story when I broke my leg in 2009? Or do I want to talk about when I almost drowned while kayaking in North Carolina? Right away, just by I can see some of the faces, I mean, these are stories worth telling. You can tell there's going to be some kind of a conflict. You can tell there's going to be some kind of risk. There's going to be, some kind of well, it's got to be a happy ending because I'm still here. So, and I'm walking, so a couple of those are figured out. And I'll give you a little bit of a hint. I didn't get rabies, so that was that story ended up well too. But you have to think about, okay, I know I've got a topic. Now, what do I want to say about that topic? There's a lot of different ways it could go. If I wanted to just stick with soccer, I could talk about coaching. If there was a great game that my team played, and think about how many times Disney has used the underdog story and worked it so well. The ragtag. They're doing it now. What's the running one? I can't think of the name of it, but the commercial, Kevin Costner, yeah. And you just know how it's going to turn out. It's a true story, but it's going to be a David and Goliath kind of thing, and those always make for good stories. So you just have to choose and say, okay, I know a specific story within my topic. What's the next step? Click if you would. You have to determine the purpose of the story. I mean, why do you want to tell this story? In most cases, it's going to be to entertain, if they're writing for a class. But you can use it as a cautionary tale, like don't kayak when there's a storm. That's a good idea. The waves look so inviting, though. I mean, that's really dumb 20-year-old thinking. To evoke a strong emotional response, of course, all the time. Sometimes to vent your spleen. If you're irritated about something and you can write a story that talks about somebody in a situation similar to yours. If I were writing that story today, it would be about students who were actually passing out and becoming unconscious because of too much testing. So we had that going on today. We actually broke Neonet. Did you know that it actually went down? There was so much testing going on.
Stephanie broke something else in the internet,
kids hit save and I saw them all sit back like this. I said, what did you do? And it was funny. It was one of my best kids. He was submitting his last answer,
I said, Luke, you broke the internet. He's like, I said, you broke the internet, Luke. So, and sometimes, I mean, you might want to inspire, or it's just there's a lot of other reasons, but have in mind, why do you want to tell a story? For me, it's 99% of the time it's to entertain, because you can tell how bashful and shy I am. I have a hard time opening up to people, so yeah, that's what I like to do. Click if you would. Now we got to figure out the pieces parts. Okay, I want to talk about my broken leg. So I set the introduction, and then I determine, okay, what are the really critical parts of that story? And you know, without getting too graphic, well, it is kind of a graphic story. But anyway, I started playing my game, and you know, it was towards the end of the game, and I'm a goalie, and I made my save, and but the ball hit my foot in a weird way when I came out, and I broke the outside bone on my left foot. And the worst part, the rising action, I mean, and that is what I'm doing right now. I tell you, okay, it's towards the end of the game. I'm setting the scene for you. It's a one-on-one, which, you know, when you're watching soccer, when you're watching, you know, hockey, it's the offensive player coming down against me, and I'm the last line of defense, so I'm going to go out there and throw myself, you know, at the guy and either make the save or die trying. And I went out there and I made the save, and then the ball hit my foot in a weird way, and my leg folded under me, and I heard 4 pops. Ooh. And yeah, and when I tell people that it sounded like bubble wrap under my skin, that's all I have to say. And now suddenly we have the rising action, and now there's the what's next. And then you know, the next part of the story would be they you know, held me off the field, and I'm sitting on the bench, and then the call to my wife, honey, so good to talk to you. Is your game over, sweetheart? Well, it is for me. Can you meet me at the field and bring the crutches? Click. And then so I go to urgent care, where I spent 5 hours waiting. Urgent care. And then the doctor, they take me back, and they do the x-rays and everything, and he looks at me and he goes, come on. And I'm hobbling by there, they're wheeling me past, and when the nurses at the nurse station ask, is that the guy, when you're heading toward the x-ray room, you don't want to be that guy. So I had a spiral fracture of the bone. They tell me I have to have surgery, and it really, when he showed me the x-ray, it looked like a barber pole. It was nasty. So I have a 9-inch titanium plate in my leg, and I had 13 wood screws, and it was this whole, you know, I missed the whole 4th quarter of school, and it was quite an ordeal. But and then the climax was, you know, it's really funny. Most people say, and then your wife stopped letting you play soccer at your age. And no, I'm still playing, surprisingly enough. And knock on wood, everything's been okay for a while. But that is a complete beginning, middle, end story. And that's what the kids have to know that they've got. And if there's a piece of it missing, it's not going to be very interesting. I can tell a lot of stories that are about things I like, but there's just no conflict. There's nothing that makes it more interesting. Click if you would, please. And that you can adapt that to any situation. And have them tell the story. And then here's the key tip, and I also call it the miserable truth. The good writing that we know of, it takes more than one attempt, and Tom, you alluded to that earlier, that the best authors, one of my favorite stories is, the story changes over time, but you know, Stephen King writing Carrie, I think it was rejected 13 times, and he loves to tell the story. He threw it in the trash. He took the story and threw it in the trash, and Tabitha, his wife, came and took it out and said, don't give up on it yet. I think I like it so much, I think it's going to work. And like the 2nd or 3rd time after that he sent it out, he sold it, and I think he sold the rights for something like $2,500. And then once it went to paperback, he got $400,000, some crazy amount. But he had to revise it. He had to go back in, and kids will not do that. Kids don't want to do it. As soon as you talk about revising, they will scowl, growl, and rebel, but not necessarily in that order. It depends on the kids. But what I tell my kids that writing is, you're developing your writing muscle just like you would develop any other muscle for sports or for music or for dance. I tell them it would be ridiculous if you went to basketball practice and the coach said, we're going to work on free throws, and you took your free throw and said, oh, I am done, let's get out of here. And then my basketball players start laughing. And I said, what are you laughing? I said, we just worked on free throws. They're like, no, you worked on free throw. There's no plural, you did one. I said, but why would you think that's stupid? And they said, well, most of the time you can't sing it. And I said, how do the pros do? And they said, well, it depends on the pro, but some of them are lousy. And it's muscle memory. I said, writing is no different. It's the same thing with weightlifting. If you went into the weight room and you lifted 5 pounds one time and thought, man, I am ready for a rub down, and I am ready for something to eat, it's ridiculous because you haven't done the work and you haven't trained your body to push that resistance away from you. And it's the same thing with storytelling. The first time out is going to be good, but there's always room for improvement. And trying to sell that to the kids, in a way that's not grading them and judging them and saying, wow, your first copy is, you say, hey, I like where you are, and let's see where we can take it next. So, and that's such I heard a couple people say it's such an important part. Click, please, sir. First draft is done. Yay! I like that picture, too. Click again. Now, here's the tough part. So, as an instructor or a mentor, what kind of things can we be doing to help them improve their stories? Once we've got that first thing on paper, that's terrific. But our goal is to get them to be really good writers and to get them to improve and make their stories something that other people want to read. There's a lot of student writing that I read, and it's a forced march, and they're like, okay, I wrote it, just give me my B or B minus, and I want to move along. But if you can entice them into wanting to improve, here's some things that I do with my Power of the Pen kids. Click, sir. Read the story for pleasure first when you're in the mentor or the teacher role. And really read it as though you're approaching, like you're reading a regular story that you would pick up from the bookstore. When you read it, are you entertained? And pay really close attention to the different parts that we talked about, and try to. And this is again a skill that's developed over time. So you as a mentor or a teacher, you got to give yourself a lot of time and see a lot of stories to know what to look for. Some of the things that I do, click. I ask myself, was I entertained? And then I start to look at it for the different parts. So when I'm analyzing the plot, do they have a nice step-by-step path? And I keep thinking of that graph I showed you where you've got the increasing action. Are we working towards something? For me in my leg story, it was just getting my leg repaired and then getting back into real life. And then, I spent a lot of time on the couch, and I had my computer hooked to a TV, and I was doing my email while, my leg was throbbing. It was horrible. So I want to make sure that there is there's one element leading to the next. And is the main character pursuing a goal worth achieving? A lot of times kids just don't have a great story. It's not engaging. You can find the pieces, but there's no risk. There's no character putting themselves out there and risking something that may or may not work out. And for me, it's very flat then. So look at it in that aspect. And then what about the characters? When we find could we find the protagonist and the antagonist? Who's the good guy and who's the bad guy? It gets a little more difficult if it's like a man versus environment situation, and the kids have sometimes a difficult time realizing that the island is actually the bad guy. It's trying to kill the castaway. If you're thinking Tom Hanks or something like that, that's the environment becomes the bad guy. And then of course the conflict. What force is opposing the main character? There's got to be a significant force that's pushing backward, and that ties back into the risk. What is that main character willing to do to achieve his or her goal? What are they willing to hurdle to get there? And if you got a main character who doesn't have the intestinal fortitude to keep pushing forward, the readers aren't going to follow it. I mean, just on its basic level, Harry Potter's a great one. Where when you think about where he started from and what he had to overcome, and when you start talking about his past, when you start talking about demons in the closet, he adds another layer that's a lot of fun. So look at it in these terms. Click again, sir, if you would. And then also look for the balance of these different items. Like for the description, I've got when my Power of the Pen writers, man, these kids can write some description. They will knock your socks off. But they've only got 40 minutes to produce their story. So if they go, the first 22 minutes describing the setting, they're not leaving a lot of time to give us all these other elements. A lot of the kids too shy away from dialogue, which is hilarious because in a middle school, all you hear is dialogue. Right. It's dialogue constantly, and yet they don't want to add it to their stories. I always like to ask them this too. I said, wait a second, here's how you should add dialogue to your story. And unfortunately, this example doesn't work as well because we are in a group of, we're a society of cell phone users. But when there were landlines, when you would pick up the phone and you would hear somebody on the other end, you would cover the receiver and listen. Right. I said, why do you do that? Because it's interesting to see what people are talking about. And when people are on their cell phones, you're constantly eavesdropping. If they're in line and they're in Starbucks and they're talking too loudly, I want to know what's going on. And the more animated and heated they are, the more interested I am. Because I watch Real Housewives. That's how I roll. So the dialogue, do the characters speak enough or do they speak too much? I like those moments. Sometimes kids don't realize the climax of the story doesn't have to be the battleship blowing up. Right. Sometimes it can just be the son confronting his father and asking him why he left. That's a moment that the whole story could build toward. And that could be your climax of the story. That is where the resolution is figured out. And it can have a lot of drama. So make sure the characters are talking, that they're well-rounded. And then I keep going back to the roadblocks, or the characters' challenge as they work to achieve those goals. If for some reason there's not enough pushback, it's not going to make for a very interesting story. So, click sir. And if you have a question anytime, raise your hand, or if you want to throw something out there, because I tend to get on a roll, just because I'm used to dealing with 6th graders. If I take a breath, they start talking. So I think I've actually developed gills, right? Breathing and talking at the same time.
Same's true in Akron and Euclid. If you guys have comments or questions, just shout, okay? They're muted.
Yes.
They're muted right now.
Yeah,
So they
I can do that with my classes.
Right,
Talk about
exactly.
peaceful.
Yeah, don't you need a mute button
Oh
for
my
middle
gosh.
school?
I do that to some of my
yeah.
kids. I have my BPU remote right there, and I pointed at them.
All right, right.
Nice.
And always my top kids always get in there laughing, and the other kids are like, what?
Right.
So once the skeleton of the story's in place, add some meat to those bones by showing rather than telling. Has anybody heard that adage before, show, don't tell?
Oh, yeah.
Does anybody find it difficult to achieve, or you're not 100% sure what it means? For a long time, I didn't get it. And then there were a couple things that I read and a couple things I saw that really helped, and hopefully I'll be able to help you today. And then enhancing the images using sensory details and revision techniques. And I don't know, were you familiar with Harry Noden?
No.
Okay, the name of the book is Image Grammar, and Harry Noden was a former colleague. He's retired now, and he really kind of revolutionized the way narrative writing was taught at our school. I think he was either 30 or 32 years. And he wrote, and it became very popular as far as among teachers for teaching grammar in a way that is storytelling at the same time. So it's a wonderful resource. And I'll kind of walk you through each one of these pieces.
Okay.
So, telling versus showing. Click if you would. A lot of times kids will say something like this, okay, the storm was terrible. That is a telling phrase. They're not letting you, the reader, use your imagination. They're not letting you put the pieces in place in your head to know, I mean, a bad storm can occur in a lot of different ways. So the idea, and I tell this to my power of the pen writers kind of do this already just because they love it. But the writers that are being forced to come along in the writing portfolio pieces, you have to kind of do the old. So that is a telling sentence, and you're not putting anything on your reader. You're not having them imagine the situation. Click again. This is an example of showing. Vivid lightning lanced from angry clouds as sheets of cold rain roared down, saturating the city. Booming thunder rattled the building's foundations and shook the thin window panes in their frames. Obviously, you see why kids who don't like to write do it this way. There's a little more involved here. But I think all of us would probably agree that the quality of the writing on the right-hand side is a lot better. But that is a real chore for a lot of kids to get to. If you ask them, how come you don't do it this way? I don't know how to do it this way, so you got to break it down. Question?
I know when I started teaching them the difference, my power, because I coach power to pen too.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
What school?
Heskett.
Okay, awesome.
And so when I started telling the students to, show a story versus tell a story, they got all into showing, and I had to tell them you are not able to show the whole story in 40 minutes. So do you often tell your writers to show at the beginning somewhere, at the middle, and then at the end?
Yeah,
pieces.
Oh yeah, and that's a hard thing too when we do our practice prompts. I told when the Power of the Pen kids, after we do the tryouts and they make the team, right. I tell them your problem is I said you're not typical middle schoolers. You have too many words. Right. Most middle schoolers don't have enough, and they're trying to find ways to make their writing more expansive. So you guys can do that, no problem. But you've got to pick and choose the right images. So we do talk about that. We talk about, I had one student last year, and boy, I had such a hard time. He would pick the most random thing to describe. For example, he would talk about the main character's teeth. For whatever, it was the first time we saw that character, he would talk about the straight teeth and the gleaming teeth. They were just beautiful. And I said, I'm not sure why. Is he going to do something with those teeth?
Right.
Is he a part beaver? Is he going to chew through a tree? And we need to know these teeth. And I don't remember where I read it was a writer's help book, because I like to write myself. And the bit of advice was, if you walk into a room and you show in the setting there's a gun on the table, that gun better go off before the story is over. Okay. And that made so much sense to me. So I said, look, if you're going to focus on the teeth, make it for a reason. But it's different if you focus on if there's been a house fire and you focus on the doll. If it was a doll that was given to the main character, at some critical point in their life, and they realize that now that this doll is burned and the family, maybe the force too. So the destruction of the toy becomes a symbol for the destruction of the family. Now, so you've got to pick those moments that are most significant to describe, and that can be tricky.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's ever read the Yellow Wallpaper, the short story.
No.
But it's pretty crazy. If you're looking at the Lottery by
Shirley
Jackson.
Love it.
It's a short story, has a great twist, and it focuses on someone's teeth
Nice.
for a good reason.
And hey, at least there's a good reason for it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the important part. So,
You know, what I was wondering is if how and when you teach children to be sensitive to the audience they're writing for. When I was a teacher, I had a student write a very violent and graphic short story that was entirely inappropriate for a 8th grade classroom. And even when we called the parents in to talk about this, the parents couldn't fail to see, well, he completed the assignment, didn't he?
Oh.
yeah, and that's a really tricky thing too. And I ran into this because when I finished teaching 8th grade and they moved me down to 6th grade and I started teaching science, I told the kids part of the portfolio component that they had was you have to read a book of your choosing. And I said, I really don't mind what you read. It can be R-rated, but your parents have to sign a form and say they're okay with it. And what I would steer them away from was things that could really get them in trouble for, if the school counselor got a hold of it and didn't understand. Because, yes, I think in middle school in particular, because the kids they will step up to whatever bar you set. So if you tell them that, hey, I'm giving you free reign, but be aware that the audience that you're looking for, is me. If you go outside of that, this may not be acceptable. And I would always tell the kids, I wouldn't call it swearing when they were writing. They said, can we write swear words? I said, look, I'm going to call that writing colorfully. And I said, remember, you're not Picasso, so not too much color. I said, every once in a while you can drop something not horribly offensive. Right. And yeah, I think you need to know your audience too. But I talked about that a lot in 8th grade. And one of my writers from Power of the Pen 2 years ago, she only wrote depressing pieces. I mean, every single paragraph. And she was so good, but it started with a downpour. Right. It was just and she found 100 different ways to talk about a downpour, and it would be this terrible, depressing story. The main characters just being treated horribly by all of society. At the end, she would always write a smiley face and say, you don't need to talk to the counselor, this is just fiction.
Nice.
Because she knew, there was always cutting going on, and it was always very, very graphic. But with Power of the Pen, and Tom's mom put this whole thing together, and the idea was not to censor the writer. In a classroom setting, you have to. In a really creative writing scenario where, and we're told, and during the judging, don't judge based on content. If it's something that's pretty gritty, and some of the kids, even in 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade, they're pretty. They know of certain stories. If they've read Speak or something like that, you may read a story about rape that might not be appropriate for school. But in Power of the Pen, it works.
Yeah, I had writers who would intentionally, I would tell them you have to evoke the emotion of anger or sad. And they would say, I'm trying to get my reader to cry. So they would write the added stories.
Yeah, but the way they were able to do that is because they've at least been in touch with some of those emotions. And when we talk about the purpose for writing, one of them is to evoke a strong emotion. Yeah. And especially in Power of the Pen, only having 40 minutes to do it. Yeah. They look at it as kind of a feat. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Can I do it?
Yeah.
Can I get just the right words to make it happen? So, back to the presentation I had. Can you find? Oh, yeah. Look at you.
Look at us. Look at that.
That's beautiful. Click again. Okay. The biggest thing you can do if you want to instantly improve their writing is sensory details. So when you're talking about the 5 different senses, and I had a printout, and of course it got rained on, and now I don't even know what it was. But and I was talking in particular about a roller coaster, and if you didn't have the picture in front of you, but you could picture it in your mind, what is one of the sights you would see when you're waiting in line for a roller coaster? What is something specific you would see on that thing? And you can cheat and look right at the picture. What's something you're seeing?
Like people screaming.
People, absolutely. They're in the car, hopefully having a good time. Nobody's vomiting, is our hope. Especially if you're behind them. What's something else you see?
The sky.
The sky. Beautiful blue sky. Puffy clouds have to be one of the next things. What else? And after the easy ones are gone, you got to look a little closer.
The smell of the wood, because it's probably old wood.
That's coming up. Well, you're right on target. Something else you might see. I was just looking at the wood itself and how weathered it might be. I was really trying to push myself, and I thought, okay, I can see the surface stairs leading up to the top in case I need to work on the chain. I'm thinking about the color of the car that's going down, with the clothing that people are wearing. Click again if you would, Tom. Sure. And then once more, so the train, the riders, the sounds. That pull chain cranking on the wooden roller coasters, and for those of you that like roller coasters, if you want to talk about one of the feelings, like when you get to that hill and the train is kind of going on gravity, and then it hits and it slows down, there's that jerk. And you feel it right in your back when the chain catches. So I was thinking of that, the sound, the screams of the people, and actually the roar of a wooden roller coaster. The ones that are on rails make more of a whoosh. So these are the kind of things you want the kids to kind of tap into. And of course, we would hear the people with various screams going on. Some it's more of a triumphant yawp, where others it's just pure terror. That's why it's fun when you go to Cedar Point and you stand by the Tower of Terror. Anybody ever done this? Or the Power Tower? It's great. Basically, it's 4 big poles, and there's 2 of them where the car goes up and it waits for a second, then it drops. But the other one, it just launches. So when you get like 4 or 5 teenage girls there, it's so much fun to watch because the anticipation is so thick you can feel it. And their faces are like this, and they're holding on, and it's like, and then suddenly it takes off, and their faces just change, and the scream is hilarious because it's super loud, then the Doppler effect kicks in, and it just disappears. And then you can't hear anything, and then you hear it come back down again, and they bounce back up for a while. It's really a lot of fun. For the sense of touch, the seatbelts, when you put those things on, that secure feeling. The bar comes down, so you're holding onto that rail in front of you. The vibration as that thing is going through the turns and everything. The stomach dropping down the first hill is fabulous. Just the wind in your face. There's so many actual feelings, and some of the other ones are kind of funny. The bar could be sticky because who else was holding it that day? I mean, it might be kind of nasty, but it's true. Click again. The smells, the treated wood. We went to the wood right away. Also the industrial grease. I always smell, because they keep those chains lubricated and everything, and you can smell them. And then just the amusement park food, which is of course one of my favorite things. And then the tastes, of course. Speaking of amusement park food, corn dogs, which I think should be one of the main food groups. Cotton candy, funnel cakes, fries, all that kind of stuff. And this, if you just said we went to the amusement park, this is what you didn't say. And that's what I tell my kids. I said, when you say we had a great time on the roller coaster, all of these things, the roller coaster itself could be the story. Right. My first ride on the roller coaster. Boy, you talk about inherent, that's just built-in tension. Walking up that line and then standing there and then having the usher take you to your seat and you feel buckled down. And that's when you start to talk about the nuance. Because once the seatbelt is on you, some of the kids will go right for the tail and say, I was shackled in. I was chained. I couldn't move. I was stuck. There was no going back now. All of these things that build tension. Every one of those comments builds tension. And we feel it, whether we acknowledge it or not. And then when the train goes up, and the climax in this case is when it goes down the hill. Do they live or do they die? In most cases, it works out fine. But I always like to show the kids, this is what you didn't say when you say, I went on the roller coaster. Click. Okay, so adding story details using Harry Noden's revision techniques. So what are these things? In a nutshell, I'll let you know here. They're just common grammatical constructions that excellent writers use to enhance images and to change the rhythm and flow of their writing. And there are 5 main ones that Harry used, and these are in his image grammar book. But they will help to, well, click again if you would. What they're used for, they add layers of imagery, and you can even advance the plot by adding some of these grammatical techniques, which is not something, when we think of grammar, we think, where's that comma go? And, we think of, you haven't capitalized your first letter, which is part of it. But you can advance the plot with these techniques. You can create a mood based on your word choice. And you can enhance the rhythm of the text. That's something that I think a lot of younger readers don't put much stock in. But for me, the adding of a phrase or like a dependent clause when it's attached with a comma, there's a rhythm to the core sentence, and then there's a pause, and then it picks up again. There's an almost musical quality to it. And readers pick up on that. If you give them sentences that are 50 words long every single time, they're going to be exhausted by the end of the first page. Or if they're only 3 or 4 word sentences, you're going to feel like you're being shot at with a machine gun. There I was. I saw it there. And then I went, and then we did. You're in a 50 caliber machine gun firing over your head. Click. Okay, so this is the first one, and this takes a while to train these things. And if anybody was interested in getting a little more information, I've got some Word documents that I've put together and I use with my kids. And if this is something that appeals to you and you want, I would be able to email those to you. So just, you gave my email address or something?
Yes, it's in your directory in your notebook.
Super. So the first one's beginning the sentence with a prepositional phrase. And what's funny is once I show you this, and if you've not seen this before, you'll think, oh my gosh, this is in every good book I like. When you walk away from a book and say, man, that was an excellent piece of writing, these are littered throughout it. So click again, sir, if you would. Simply, you're going to take the core sentence, which is just your subject and verb, and you're going to attach a PowerPoint to the front of the sentence using a comma. So my core sentence, click. And I like to start the kids with something really simple. Okay, so the dog sat. You got your subject, and what's he doing? He's sitting. But that is a really dull sentence. So by adding a prep phrase at the beginning, we can start to paint in some more detail. Click if you would. In a gorgeous 2-story doggy mansion, the dog sat. So we took this little 3-word sentence, and now we've turned it into something that's got a pretty nice image using a grammatical technique that is helpful. Can anybody tell me, what do we know about the dog or his situation just by this prep phrase? What would you guess?
He has money.
Seems like you got money. Most people don't have a 2-story doggy mansion. Notice my careful choice of words. I didn't say dog house. I said dog mansion. So by the specificity of the words that are used, you can really start to put a flavor to this. Click again if you would, sir. The next one is in a positive phrase, which is simply renaming a noun that's already in the sentence to give it more specificity. The construction is, you pick a noun that is in the sentence and rename it with another noun. Go back to our core. We've got our dog. The dog is still sitting, but to make it more specific, the dog, a perfectly groomed snow white poodle, sat. And think about it. When I said the dog sat, all of you had a gray cutout image of a dog. You know, maybe some ears, tail, tongue out, but what kind of dog? As soon as I say poodle, I wipe all of that confusion away. If I had said Rottweiler, if I had said Doberman, if I had said German Shepherd, it no longer becomes a faceless image. Now we know that, you know, Fluffy the poodle is who we are dealing with. And we can tell, sitting in the mansion and perfectly groomed. Snow White, we know that it's well cared for, because if it was all covered in mud, you would know nobody loved the poodle. So we can tell a few things just by adding this a positive, by making it a little more specific. Click again if you would. ING participle, you will see these everywhere because they're a nice way to kind of extend the action or to paint an image. So take a core sentence, and you add a participial phrase with an ING at the beginning. Nice thing about this one is it's really flexible. It can be at the beginning of a sentence. You can break the subject and the verb and stick it in the middle if you want to take a little pause when you're completing the sentence, or you can follow up by having it at the end. Let's see what we did with our dog. The dog sat crossing its front paws regally. Again, notice how I'm cheating by putting in words that are trying to give you a tone. Give you the business. And this presentation is also linked, isn't it? So yes, people can go through this. Yeah, so if you don't get it down, don't worry, you can go back to it. Adjectives out of order. This is an interesting one that's kind of hard for the kids to do. I left the last two specifically at the end because they are more challenging. Click, sir, if you would. So you've got a core sentence and you've got one or more adjectives that you added in an order that you don't expect. For example, if you're talking about a truck, you usually say the red truck, or you say the broken down truck, or you say the dilapidated car, whatever. In this construction, you take those adjectives and move them away from the noun they're describing, and you set them off by commas, again, to change the rhythm and to draw the reader's attention to it in a more significant way. Click. Dog sat. Click. The dog, tiny but fierce, sat. So you might say that the tiny, fierce dog sat. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with it. Good word choice and whatnot. But by taking those adjectives and placing them out of order, it makes you pause a beat more on the adjectives, and it draws more attention to them. And then finally, click the absolute phrase, which is a blank blanking. That's how Harry Noden presents it. And it's a nice way for the kids to remember. Click again. The core sentence plus a noun ing phrase attached to the beginning, middle, or end of the sentence with a comma. This will make more sense when you see it. And for me, because it's hard for the kids to do, but I think it's a really significant structure. I try to teach my Power of the Pen writers to use this one a lot. Click, and you'll see the dog still sat. Now the dog sat, its diamond-studded collar glittering in the sunlight. So you've got your noun, which is the collar, and what's it doing? It's glittering. So you've got your noun and your ing right together. I put a little bit of a description in the front of it just to enhance that image of it. But again, look at the core sentence. The dog sat. That is a pretty dull sentence. It's a sentence, but it's pretty dull. But then when you add something like this, you're adding a lot more to it. So the next logical question, can you add the techniques together and make a longer, more complex sentence? Let's check it out. In a gorgeous two-story doggy mansion, the dog, a perfectly groomed snow white poodle, tiny but fierce, sat crossing its front paws regally, its diamond-studded collar glistening in the sunlight. Check it out. The dog, where's my sat? It's still there. The core sentence is still there, but now it's surrounded. Now, you wouldn't do this all the time because this is obnoxiously long, but just to show you these grammatical techniques can be used and combined. And one of the files that Tom shared with you is, I don't know if there's any fantasy fans in here. I love Game of Thrones. And I went through and I found George R.R. Martin's revision techniques. I mean, every single page is littered with them. And I put them together under headings so you can have examples of these and you can see what they look like. But boy, they add so much to the writing. And if you get your writers to do this, I'm trying to get my writers to do it right now, and they're not quite there yet, but we're hopeful. You can see the potential it has to really add description so that now you're not just telling a story, you're telling it in a beautiful way. And you're telling it in a way that's more musical and poetic. Click, sir, if you would. Now, here we go. So we can tell a story that we know about. Okay, I can tell my broken leg story, I can tell my cat story, I can tell my drowning story, because I didn't. But what about those students that want to write fantasy, or what if they don't live in the Game of Thrones universe? They can't be experts on it, so what do you do? And what it comes down to is, anybody want to hazard a guess? George R.R. Martin never lived there. Orson Scott Card didn't live where Ender did. So how'd they do that?
Make it up.
Make it up how? Do you think they had any help?
Library.
Perhaps. Right, a lot of reading.
Exactly. Click. They're doing this kind of training all the time. It's just research. And if the students have an interest in the fiction, they're going to learn about the worlds through books, through movies, TV shows, video games, and any other pop culture that they're involved in. Because these, when they look at the Harry Potter, what an amazing world he created. And I imagine that he read science fiction from people that he really respected. And it started to lay the foundation for what he said, okay, here's what this author said, but I want to try something a little bit different. And it's when you step away from the original, just a half step, that you start to change it. It's kind of like adaptation of animals out in the wild, if you think about it. A little bit at a time they change, so that if you look at the first science fiction story compared to where we are now, they're so different. In a really, really good way. And the kids, when they watch, because the kids watch a lot of TV, they watch a lot of movies. I mean, look how big the movie industry is, just billions and billions of dollars. And that's how they're doing their research, even though they don't know it. Click again, sir. So the research will make the fictional pieces more realistic through specificity. And this is what I was talking about before. If a kid's going to write a story about being a soldier in Afghanistan, if they haven't done the research, they might say something like, well, the soldier took out his gun. Again, there's that image, the dog. Yeah, but what kind of dog? Okay, so if you have a little bit of background knowledge, it makes it so much more specific. Now, if you say the gun, or you change the gun to an M4 carbine assault rifle fitted with an M203 40mm grenade launcher, now, even though I don't know what half of that stuff is, you got me. Because I'm a big sucker for jargon, and I know that kid is really into it. I had a writer last year who was just wonderful, and he taught me so much about history that I never learned in 8th grade because I was too much of a goof off. But he had all these wonderful battles that I didn't even know, and he was introducing me to the characters, and what I loved about his writing was the specificity. And it's the same thing, I won't read you the whole thing, but the word tank, I went online and did a little bit of research. I'm like, well, I know what an Abrams tank is, but I didn't know that it had a smoothbore gun that was called an M256A1, and that it fired explosive shells, and it had a 50 caliber M2HB. Again, even if I read this in Power of the Pen as a judge, I wouldn't know exactly what it was, but I would know it was specific, and I would know that the person who had written about it had a real love for the topic, and for me that makes it so much more interesting. And that's the kind of research that the kids are doing on a daily basis. Clickster. Research will also teach writers about commonly accepted rules in their fictional worlds. In many science fiction stories, faster than light travel is possible, even though it's not theoretically possible in our world. And I was doing a little research for a piece I want to write, and I was thinking of this idea of light speed travel, because really, when you leave our little pebble, it takes a long time to get anywhere. And I said, okay, there's a science fiction writer named Ben Bova. Are you familiar with the name at all? But he has a lot of science in his science fiction. I was thinking, yeah, I'm going to write something like that. I'd like it to be kind of realistic. And then I realized, oh man, where I want my characters to go, that's not going to be possible. So I'm looking at teleportation and all this kind of stuff. But they'll learn what the rules of their world are. Lasers used as weapons, that's something we don't do like you see in pop culture. And I know that there are some things now we do use lasers for cutting steel, and at some point we may have these things, but we don't now. And then another one I like to share is the Asimov's 3 Laws of Robotics. There's a lot of stories not written by Isaac Asimov where those rules are in place. If there's artificial intelligence of some kind, they kind of adhere to these rules because a science fiction writer laid the groundwork. And it makes it easier for other writers to kind of step into that arena and have some rules already in place. And the kids learn this as they go through, and they start to make their own judgments. So when they write their own pieces, there's an inherent logic to it. And that's something that you can, if the kid is writing a fantasy piece, as long as they set up the groundwork that you can have magic and you can use magic, that's great. And that gets a little more technical when you talk about older writers, but it kind of sets the scene. Quick, sir, if you would. Peer revision is a difficult but incredibly valuable process. This is one of my favorite things to do with kids when I was teaching language arts and portfolio writing, because the students, when they write their own pieces, they become very blind to them. It's amazing how they don't see the flaws in their own writing. But as soon as they hand that paper to the person next to them and they have a set of guidelines, they start to be able to say, okay, you know what, this is what my friend is doing that I'm realizing I want to see something different. And they also realize that there might be a weakness in their own writing. So that's another file that I gave to you there where I linked and it's just a basic template for having kids responding to each other. You have to be careful when you do that. You always have to set the rules, because kids can be, they intentionally want to be cruel. You're like, this story doesn't make any sense. Kids, think about it. Is there another way to say that? And when I'm giving feedback, and it goes back to, I think you had mentioned, I forget who it was that said, you have to have that positive feedback, and something that I found worked so well, it took me a while to find it. Rather than saying, your story really lacks dialogue, okay, that feels like, you did that, you did not, the story stinks. I said, you know what I really wanted? I wanted to hear your characters talk more. I felt like they were engaged in the moment, but I didn't get to hear it where you said, we had a conversation and we worked it out. So that's the crux of your story. Man, I wanted to be in the lunchroom next to them listening. Can you do that? Because right away, then you're showing you're an enthusiastic reader. And they're thinking, wow, this is something I can do for my reader. So man, and I tell my kids that too. I train them. I say, don't tell your writer something you think they're missing or something they did not do. Tell them what you'd like to see that their writing right now doesn't have. And boy, that takes all the pressure off. And then when you talk about the anonymity, or you talk about having a student that's a little nervous about sharing, I think it's great to say, put them on, have I statements rather than you statements, and it has worked out well for me. But it's nice too because it forces the kids to read closely and critically, and it gives them a chance to analyze a piece of writing from several different levels, and they will help each other grammatically too. If they have a partner who tends to be better grammatically, it's going to be a big benefit. Or even if they're on par, they can at least offer suggestions. And then they get feedback from one or more peers who are at the same level of expertise. Sometimes I'll tell a kid, oh, I want to see more revision techniques. I want to see more brush strokes to make it more beautiful. And they're kind of like, oh, I don't usually use those. And their friend will be able to say, he means you're not describing enough. I'm like, oh, okay. So having that same kind of language that's not as teachery as we sometimes tend to be, I think it's really helpful. Sharpening specific skills. These are a couple of the files that Tom has me linked for you. So now you've got all this stuff done, and what I do with my Power of the Pen writers is I try to determine, is there an overall weakness that they have in their writing? And a lot of times when you're dealing with 12 writers, there'll be at least half that are lacking in one particular skill. And then the challenge for the teacher or the mentor becomes, all right, so what do I need to do, or what is a way that I can get them to do what they're not doing and not have them stop what I like? And that's where you have these kind of targeted approaches. Click, sir. Description. Since a picture is worth 1,000 words, work from the images. Providing students with images gives them scaffolding to jumpstart their process. Without images, students are trying to achieve two goals. They're trying to imagine a scene and write a description. So I really try to use pictures because I say, okay, describe a lighthouse, because I had one earlier. Now they have to go into their memory bank and say, okay, have I seen a lighthouse? I've seen some in pictures. What was around it? If I show them a picture of the Cape Hatteras lighthouse, they can see the sea oats next to it. They think about the sky. Depending on the picture, they may see the rust on the railing that surrounds the catwalk at the top. They may notice that there are different facets to the light itself, depending on how much zoom there is on the picture. But by providing them with the picture already, now you're allowing them to just focus on the skill that you want them to focus on, and that is describing. And again, that goes right back to the sensory details that we talked about earlier. So these things are practical on different levels. And I'll put a PowerPoint together. One of the things that I do, and I don't know if you have your kids like work on like specific description like that, if they work from pictures, I go to any one of the news websites that have pictures of the week. I'll open up a PowerPoint, right-click the picture, paste it. Right-click the picture, paste it. And then suddenly I say, okay, just describe. And then I can say, now there's a couple of different things we can do. I'll say purely describe. I want you to pretend you're the one with the camera.
Okay.
What did you see? And then say, remember, sensory details. What are we seeing? Is it, what are you smelling at the same time? Right. Or sometimes if I don't want them to focus on description, I can use that same picture and say, okay, this is the climax of the story. What led up to it? Right. How did we get here? Why is that whale there? And why is there a clown on the pier that's feeding him something? Right. A strange image. But yeah, find a powerful image and you can use it in a lot of different ways. But that it really takes the pressure off the kids to try to imagine something and then describe it without having it right in front of them. Right. Click, please, sir. Create a PowerPoint or Google presentation and place a different image on each page. This kind of talks what I was going through. And then asking for several volunteers to share out loud. For Power of the Pen, it's no problem. I mean, they're there because they like to write. And it sounds like everybody in our program likes to write too, and they like to have their words read, which is terrific. But I love to use this idea. If you're talking about a regular classroom of kids, I talk about the Barnes & Noble analogy. And the kids say, well, I just listened to what's her name, and she's so talented. She's just such a great writer. And I really don't want to get up there and humiliate myself by having my cruddy words read, and I'll never live it down, and it'll be embarrassing. But I say, you are saying something that the person next to you can't say, and the person behind you can't say, and the person next to you can't say, because we all have our own experiences. We've all seen our own movies and read our own books. We've all lived our own lives. Their parents aren't your parents. Your genetic code is completely different. You can say something nobody else can say. I said, imagine if George R.R. Martin had read a Stephen King book and said, that King, he's so talented, I'm never going to write. My words are they're not his words. I said, there'd be no Barnes & Noble, there'd be no bookstores, because people wouldn't realize there's value in every single one of those voices. Because what I like, somebody else doesn't. And I said the same thing with student writing. And I'll tell them, don't read your whole piece, find me one sentence. Find me one sentence that you think works. And I'll give them the right to pass. I'll say, what do you got? Nothing this time. Next time I'll catch you. And if you want to share something, feel free. But really empowering them to realize that although they don't say it like the A+ students, there are a lot of students that have a voice. And one thing that I do is I was hijacking their portfolios. And I had a couple straight C students, D students, F students. But when they hit on a story about their lives that was really powerful, I put it on my website. And then I would give them credit. I'd say, I hope you don't mind. I said, I put it up there and I put your name and lights. And what a difference it made for those kids, because I got permission first. I made sure they said I could share it. It was nothing usually too personal. But I said, wow, this is somebody who felt that maybe they didn't have a voice, and they really do. So getting them to feel that comfort is one of the big keys to, I think, having them want to continue writing. And I think we can really develop writers who say, I'm not afraid to try this. I think I've got something to say, even though it's not what great writers do. Click there. And then making sure that you transfer these things. So what I do is, once they write their story, say we do a descriptive piece, I show them the whatever happens to be a lighthouse. They write a big description. Then I tell them, okay, you know what? Now go back into one of the pieces you submitted earlier and find one place where you used a noun or you used a scene, but only give me one sentence. Now I want you to do that same thing. I want you to expand it completely. Give me 5 sentences that focus only on that one noun, so that they see, okay, now I'm actually improving. Instead of doing this in a vacuum with this activity that the teacher gave me, can I step back into my own world and expand that? And now suddenly they have really quick feedback, and they've got a really practical exercise that's going to allow them to improve their writing in a minute, literally. It's great.
I'm sorry, I must have missed something. You
Sure.
said they take a noun and do what with it? Can you give me an
Expand
example?
it. Yeah, like put more description to it. For example, if they were visiting a house
Okay.
in their story, but they just didn't describe the house very much, and I didn't get much of a sense of what it was like.
Okay.
I say take that word house because it's the opening scene in your story. I want more of a setting. What kind of house is it? I mean, if I use the word shack or something like that, then right away the word choice alone lets me know what I'm dealing with.
Okay.
But I'll say, tell me, what's the color of the house? How many stories is it? You know, how well cared for is it? What's the yard around it like? And that's to just take their piece and expand it and make it more visual, make it more visceral.
So when they have the noun, you give them sentences to develop it, or they have to come up with the ways to develop that noun?
Yeah, I will walk them through, like, say I make a PowerPoint presentation with the cards in it.
Okay.
I'll have them describe that as a class activity.
Okay.
And then I want them to go back into their own writing and find something that they didn't describe very well.
Gotcha.
And then I'll say, and then they can pick whatever they want and just make that transfer from and this goes back to what we talked about earlier. You can't do that with every noun.
Right.
If you exhaustively described every noun, your reader would be worn completely out of bored senses. So you got to kind of pick your battles. But yeah, but having that connection back to their actual work, I think, is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Click. Dialogue. Pay attention to conversations in earshot. Turn these into scenes to practice the writing. Notice the age of the speakers. What are they talking about? What kind of vocabulary do they use? This is what really helps to develop characters. I had a great moment. I don't know if I told you my team did really well when we went to university. We placed first in 8th grade. We placed second in 7th grade. And It's so funny. I've got this very quiet Asian writer. His name is Yuhan. And it's so funny because Yuhan never says 2 words. He's so respectful. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. His parents are always emailing me and thanking me. So very, very polite. He doesn't say too much. And he got 3rd place at this event. And his face just went, oh, when they announced his name, and he said, well, I'll be. Of all the things an 8th grade Asian boy is going to say, well, I'll be, is not one of them. And we started laughing. I said, and we talked about it all the way home. Because I said, I imagine you with your overalls on, you got your thumbs in there, and you got your sprig of wheat, and you're, well, I'll be, look at that, would you? I didn't think I was going to get 3rd today. And Yuhan's falling on the floor. We're having such a good time with him, so we call him Farmer Yuhan, and it's a whole thing. But when you talk about characterization, you don't know my Yuhan at all. But now you know he's a really old soul. And just that one line helps to paint that. And trying to get kids to understand what is it that's special. Like when your characters are flat, how can you spruce them up a bit? And it's by bringing real life into it. Click again if you would. The plot. Lots of different ways that you can work on the plot in your story. And when I have Power of the Pen practice, I steal the prompts right from the program, and it's something like this. Develop a story that takes place standing in line waiting for something. If kids are having a really hard time coming up with a story, and there's so many websites that have these kind of prompts, and make it a timed writing. Say, guys, today, we're just going to practice writing. This can be the worst piece of junk you've ever written in your life, and that's fine with me. I say, you will get full credit for crud. And the kids are like, sweet, I'm in. And then I tell them how I said, hold on there. You're not supposed to intentionally write badly. I said, but if it doesn't work out, that's okay. But something like, the story, the setting of your story is in a boat. There's so many different possibilities that could happen. And then you can talk about, is it a canoe? Is it an ocean liner? And then these things keep coming up again and again, and this is the practice. When we talk about ocean liner, the first thing that popped into my head was, I saw a special about that ship that ran aground in Italy, was it? Or was it Cordia? Yeah, that's where it was. And they talked to all the passengers, and until I had seen that TV show, I wouldn't have felt comfortable writing a story about that. But now that I'd seen it, that became part of my research. It becomes part of who I am as a writer of boats. Or I can talk about my own kayaking experience, but there's a lot you can do. And then something like this, too. Maybe it's more based on a personal problem. You didn't mean to, but you said it and shouldn't have. What happens next? You're actually kind of starting the story right in the climax. Okay, oh, you said it. You shouldn't have. What's the fallout going to be? And the kids can do that for 30 minutes. And this is weightlifting. This is going into the gym and pumping weight for writing. And then these are really, these are things that I use all the time. Click again. And then finally, what we all need to keep in mind is the standards. Oh, standards, we are so proud of you.
Right.
But this is from the 5th grade, and I'm not going to bore you by reading all that, but it's just basic good storytelling. Having a beginning, middle, and end, establishing a narrator and or characters, concrete words and phrases. I put this last, and it was an afterthought. But if you look at the way we teach storytelling, good storytellers do all these things. And that's why I hope people don't let the standards get in the way of what we're trying to accomplish. Because really, in a lot of cases, I mean, it goes along with what we need to do. I mean, look at narrative techniques, dialogue, description, pacing. It's all the stuff that good writers do. So, and this was nice too, because this becomes justification for teaching these things that we love to do. And that's my concern too. And Tom and I was on my soapbox with you the other day. I said, oh my gosh, all this testing, and if we take narration and narratives out of the teaching that we're doing, and we focus on being good test takers, there's not going to be movies. There's not going to be books. There's not going to be TV shows. If we create a generation of kids that are their imaginations are stunted, we're going to do ourselves a horrible disservice. So, I mean, hopefully people realize that you can still survive within a standards-driven curriculum.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was just stretching.
And I think that's my spiel. Any questions, comments, anything?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Are you? Is this available to us? The PowerPoint? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tom linked it for you.
Yeah,
cool.
the PowerPoint's available. You can go back and actually re-watch Mike's wonderful presentation. It'll be on YouTube.
Cool.
And it's accessible from the Weebly site. I know a lot of people are going to be kind of thinking about questions, whether or not you feel comfortable in voicing them here. I encourage you to. But let me just lob something over the fence at you, right? So we have lots of librarians here, and we have some teachers here. What would your encouragement be to librarians who are looking to assist teachers like yourself in engaging students with the goal of advancing literacy outcomes in your classroom? What can they do for you? How can you work together more fruitfully?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I think the thing that I know our media specialists have done for us for a long time is just promote good stuff. Just promoting, the things that they are reading and what they really love. Because I know that the media specialists and librarians got into it because they love reading and writing, I guess. Right? That's probably the reason. Oh, that's a way to bring down the house.
Oh, that's one way to end the
It is.
Describe what's happening.
I know, this would be a good story.
Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah, your reboot should be nice and easy.
Yeah, this will take more than 2 hours.
I was like, I don't think.
I think it is too.
Yeah, it's a generator. It's a
generator.
That would be such a cool story, though.
That happened. Well, you know what? That happened in my classroom today too. Yeah. And if I can give you an image, okay, I've been teaching in this room now for like 5 years, and if the school was a body, I teach in the lower intestine.
Oh
it's just awful. When it went dark, the 6th graders, every single one of the 25 of them started screaming at the top of their lungs. I said, "Stop it!" And they were like, because I don't yell too much. I'm like, guys, you have seen darkness before. It happens every night. Okay? Right. In Ohio, it happens at 4:30.
Right.
So calm down. But yeah, it's just turning people onto good books. What are the books you guys are reading? Who has a favorite book or like one of your favorites? Is there one? Because I talked about Ender's Game, which is just Game of Thrones. I mean, if you're talking fantasy, those are my favorites. But does anybody else have a book that you just love and you constantly talk to people about and say, hey, if you're going to read a book, read this one?
I like dystopian, just the genre.
What's one that you like?
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games is great. Yeah. What a great book. I thought it was awesome.
We just lost power.
Yeah, everyone lost power.
I'm still thinking of it.
Really?
The school was a body. We would be the lower intestine. That is the brilliant.
And some days after gym, it smells like that in there.
In Akron, are you there?
You are a writer. I like that.
I've written
Well, there's
3 novels
the air
myself.
right there.
Thank you.
Yeah, but nothing published. Just I wrote it for myself, but each one's like 100,000 words. Just because I like writing. I love it, and I'm working on a new one now. And it's funny that this one out. It's a ghost story basically.
Really?
Yeah. And it's pretty neat. What have you written? What kind of stuff do you like to write?
You know what? I do poetry and
Nice. Really?
Yeah.
You have to send me something. What's one of your? You have send me one of your favorite poems. I'd like to see it. I love poetry.
I am. You know what? I was just
Hey, you
telling
guys.
you, I walk around with multiple journals.
Hello?
on me. So I have
Akron,
this one here.
Akron, Euclid?
One in my
Wait, can you hear us?
Wave if you can hear us.
Hey, Euclid is still here.
Me too. I don't type it. This is my process. I like tear out something and start writing.
Hey, guys.
Here.
We just had a major power failure in Cleveland.
Oh.
Imagine- But we're back.
Woohoo! And better than ever.
I'm better than ever. We just didn't want to take questions, you guys. That was the whole
I kicked the
gig.
plug. Where's the answer? Yeah, send me one of your poems. I'd like to see that.
So, what I wanted to do before we get out of here is I'm going to go ahead and screen share real quick and put up the Pear Deck. And I apologize for the power outage, but that was beyond our control. I did want for you to be able to do an exit slip. So let me go over to that screen, and if you have a chance,
How does that work?
Cleveland doesn't have power in order to do exit slips, but if anybody wants to do one, that would be great.
Just write your impression.
I think they can hear you.
They're gonna write it.
Yeah.
Euclid, Akron, can you hear us?
I have a question. Like, should you ever get a certain genre that they don't like because they just can't relate to it?
For me, I try not to. For example, like a research paper, you have to that process. But I really try because what it comes down to is you have to decide how you want to best reach your kid. And I was like, I go back to the right pages on the history of Broadway. I mean, there's no kid that's going to be interested. You're doing a disservice to what you're trying to accomplish. You're working against yourself. So if I'm forcing them to write about something, now, if I give them the proper groundwork and I want them to write a Holocaust piece, but I allow them to read other books and read some poetry, so we're making that at peace, then maybe that's going to be a little closer to what I'm trying to get them to do, because I'm not just kind of throwing them into the fire. They don't like writing fantasy. I say, you write fantasy.
That's what I was thinking. Like, I don't like science fiction. It's like, to me, it's just not just made up stuff.
Sure.
And so that's why.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that would be a good.
No, and I think a lot of the even if people don't like, I mean, they like more realistic things. Yeah. For example, it's called Focus, and it's a literacy enrichment thing while some of the kids are being RTI'd. I read that, and it's much one of my favorite books. I didn't think I liked it. Now they went out and theories and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't if they don't like I still anyway.
Hey, you guys. Hey, Akron and Euclid, can you guys hear us?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. We had a power failure here. So I think what we're going to do is kind of draw things to a close. But I did want to just mention there's an assignment that we're asking for you to complete, real small, to search the library, see if you can locate a piece of literature that you think could inspire you in your own storytelling. So in other words, check out a book and bring it next time. Something that you'd like to read that you can find in the library that you think might help you to develop your own storytelling or narrative writing abilities, okay? Now that could be a poem, it could be a picture book, it could be a nonfiction text, like in Nancy's case, she's saying, you know what, I don't like, science fiction that much. Well, what's a topic that you are interested in, where if you read, a book or a text, that would inspire you? I think it'd be fascinating to take a look at that, and then when we climb back into class on Thursday, what we're going to do is we're going to do some activities. And those activities are going to be wrapped around locating images that can help you tell stories, and then writing some text against those, as Mike suggests.
So any book that inspires us. So it could be a children's book.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could be something that we've already read.
Absolutely. By all means. There's no wrong answer, okay? Okay, cool. Listen, Mike, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough, and I'm sorry for the power failure, but we'll see everybody back here on Thursday. Yeah.
Now we're done.
All right. I like it.
I like that.